Welcome to The Adaptive Mind, where we talk with experts about practical, effective approaches to breaking habits and changing behavior. I'm your host, Brady Dowling. I'm glad you're listening. After the episode, be sure to head over to theadaptivemind.com, where you'll find the full show notes and transcript from our discussion, as well as an episode cheat sheet. Each cheat sheet has the most important points, quotable moments, and specific actions you can take to implement the strategies we discuss. Head to theadaptivemind.com to access a cheat sheet for every episode. This episode of The Adaptive Mind is the second in a two-part series on music. In the previous episode, I chatted with Andy Tubman about the actual act of singing, how that can benefit our mental well-being and even help us break habits. And in this episode, I'm talking with Dr. Elaine Paravati. We'll discuss the benefit of solo music listening, how that can actually act as a social surrogate. We'll discuss what a social surrogate is, and then we'll get into some tips for implementing these things. Dr. Elaine Paravati Harrigan is a social psychologist with a PhD in personality, social psychology from the University at Buffalo, SUNY. She's worked as a professor and researcher at both public universities and private colleges, and is currently working on a long-term project in the field of child development psychology. I'm excited for you to listen. Thanks for joining this episode of The Adaptive Mind. Today I have Dr. Elaine Paravati. We're going to be talking a lot about music and kind of the effects it has on us socially. The other day I saw a really interesting headline, which is related to Dr. Paravati's research. It said, "Study finds solo music listening boosts social well-being." So we're going to dig into that a little bit, talk about kind of what the research was and implications for our general social well-being, and then also for breaking habits as well. But thanks for coming on, Elaine. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So to jump in, can you give maybe just a baseline of what the study was about?
Yeah, so I know when a lot of people think about their basic needs, they're thinking about things like food, clothing, shelter. But when I went into psychology, what I was really interested in is the basic need to connect with other people, the need to belong. And over again, through decades of research, they've shown that this is a basic need. That's why solitary confinement hurts so bad. That's why being isolated and excluded hurts so badly. This is something on a very deep, primitive level we all want to do and we need to do in some way. But that doesn't look the same for everybody, the way we fill that. So traditionally, we think about you fill social needs by spending time with family members, by being in a romantic relationship, by hanging out with friends, or even small interactions with a barista or a bus driver day to day, just clicking with people in person. But I wanted to look more into what are some things we do that might not look outwardly social, but actually do fill our social bucket in a similar way. And that's when I was drawn to looking at that in terms of music, because I've always been a big music lover. And I thought, well, obviously we do feel connected to people when we are listening to music with them, or when we're maybe in a choir or a band with them and we're playing music together, or we're going to a concert together. But less had been done on looking at what about when we're listening to music by ourselves. And what my work did find was that we actually can feel social connection and feel those well-being things from just listening to music in isolation.
Awesome. And you use a term which I think sounds really cool, but you use the term social surrogacy. Um, you touched on it briefly, but can you talk a little bit more about what social surrogacy is?
Yeah, so social surrogacy, there are these three different pathways that you can use to help feel fulfilled with these non-traditional types of strategies. And all those apply to music, and they also do apply to lots of other things that we do day to day. So the first one is parasocial relationships. That's this like one-sided bond you might have with a celebrity or a musical artist or a band where you listen to the music and you feel like, wow, they really understand me. They know what I'm going through. It's like I'm a friend with them. So if somebody's a really big Taylor Swift fan, they might be listening to the music and feeling social connection because they feel like they have a friendship with Taylor Swift. Outside of music, we've found this also in terms of like movie stars or just basic celebrities that you want to be reading tabloids about, or following Instagram influencers because you feel like they're your friends, you feel like you know them, you can relate to them, and so on. Second pathway is immersion into this world of that environment. So, in terms of music, you are listening to music and you're just kind of swallowed up in that music. You're no longer thinking about what's going around you. You're just really enveloped in that. In the past, we've also found that in terms of listening to watching different TV shows or rereading books. So if you're reading Harry Potter, you might really feel like you're in that world during the time that you're reading it or watching the movie. And so you're immersed in that social world. And then the third one is these reminders of others. So you are perhaps more traditionally reading old letters that somebody wrote you or looking at pictures of a trip you took together. Or in terms of like throughout the lifespan, a baby holding their blanket might be thinking about their mom and feeling connection through that. Or as you're older, having some family heirloom that someone gave you before they passed away. And when you spend time near that heirloom, you think about them. So you're thinking about that person through that object. So you're not face to face with that person, but you feel social connection as you're utilizing that thing. In terms of music, that seems very intuitive too, right? That it's, I'm putting on a wedding song that reminds me of my significant other, or I'm listening to music that was the soundtrack I listened to when I was freshman year of college going on a road trip with my friends. So those songs that you listen to that bring you right back to that moment, that's helping you remember that connection you have with people, that's going to help you feel that social connection even when you're not with them.
Right, that makes sense. So it's the three different ones, which is one is like the connection that you feel with that person. You said the parasocial connection.
Mm.
Um, Two is the immersion, almost like being taken out of your current environment and put into this other place. And then the third is being reminded of probably people that you know, or maybe situations or events. And these three kind of coming together and building this social surrogate. And is that those three, are those specific to music as a social surrogate, or is that just kind of social surrogacy in general?
Yeah, it's definitely social surrogacy in general. So when I had gone into grad school, they had looked at it in terms of those comfort objects like the baby blankets or even religious objects. They looked at old letters, old photos. They had looked at rereading books and rewatching movies and TV shows. And then when I was thinking about my own life and my own experiences and how much I felt connection when I listened to music, I thought this does seem very applicable to this as well. And so that research that you're referencing that came out recently, that was where I was experimentally looking at that and seeing and verifying that people do experience these same type of things with music that they do with other known social surrogates. So now this kind of puts music on the map as being another strategy that we can put in our toolbox and know it can give us those social connections.
Yeah, I mean, this is exciting for me. I'm not necessarily musically inclined. I don't like play in a band or, you know, make music necessarily unless, I think no one's around and then I'll sing to myself. Uh, to be able to experience some of these benefits just through listening, I would imagine is exciting in this space. Is that right?
Yeah. And I had thought similarly, like coming from a background that's opposite yours of I've played instruments, I've sang in choirs, I've been in musicals. It's been a very heavy part of my life, my whole life. I was wondering, is this just because I'm a music person that I feel this way? So something I did in my work is ask people to answer this scale of how much musical skill they had, how much musical experience they had, wondering if those who are higher on this scale would have more benefit. And actually, just like you mentioned, not at all. So it seems like across the board, people can get these benefits. It's not just people who play 15 instruments and are little Einsteins here that can do this and then feel better. It seems like this is something that can really benefit everybody, even if you can't hold a tune to save your life, which I think also is very cool that it's accessible to everybody.
Right. And so just to clarify, even for people who play music and sing, and are like versed in that kind of way, it's still, there's not any kind of loss of like, oh, I should be singing or I should be playing, you still can get those benefits. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So this is something that's kind of a separate tool of in those moments when you're by yourself listening to music in your car on the way to work, or you're laying in bed, or you're walking on the treadmill, whatever it is that you're listening to music on your own. It's just showing you don't have to be with other people and sharing that music experience in order to get those innately social benefits and then those benefits to your well-being. This is something that even when you're by yourself and you might not even think you're doing it to help you feel less lonely or feel more connected, but you can be getting those benefits anyway, which is very, very cool.
Hmm, cool. And so how in the research you did, how did you actually measure um this uptick in social well-being?
Yeah, so you want to be putting people in some type of situation that you can make sure they do feel bad, right? Not necessarily you want to make people feel bad, but you want to show they feel some type of social need that needs to be filled. You want them to feel excluded. And then you want to introduce your variable, which in this case is your favorite music, and see if that helps them feel better. And the big thing about social psychological research is that it is hard to tease apart. Well, is this just somebody saying this, or how do I measure this? Because it's not something like your white blood cell count that you can very easily measure in a very standard way. So you have to get creative and think about, how can I create these situations in a lab that still will translate to what I want them to. So what we did is, first we used this experiment condition called cyberball, which is used very often in psych research. Essentially, you're playing a computer game and you're told that you're playing with other people, but it's actually a setup computer. And they're passing a ball back and forth to you and another player. And after a few passes, they just stop passing to you and they pass to the other players. So you think you're playing with these other people, and then suddenly they're completely excluding you. And what's amazing about Cyberball is, even when you know what it is, like as a researcher, when you play it, you start like, wow, this feels real lousy. Like, it's just very well known in the literature to over and over again pull us into feeling those social needs, feeling exclusion. And fortunately, it's very low risk. Like, you tell them afterwards and they feel a little better. So we like to use that to help people feel bad temporarily, but not do long-term damage. So we have the participants playing cyberball. We ask them afterwards, how are you feeling? They're reporting to us, I do feel like I'm not connected with other people. I don't feel like I belong. I'm feeling lonely. So we know it worked. And then we allow half the participants to listen to some of their favorite songs for a brief amount of time. And then the other half, which is the control condition that we're going to compare to, we had listened to uplifting music, but it was like an unknown music that I'd found on YouTube. So didn't have words that they would necessarily be really into or offended by, wasn't something they would be familiar with necessarily. So I said, okay, I want to make sure they're still listening to something. They're not just bored. And I want to make sure it's something still somewhat uplifting, but then we can compare that to listening to your favorite music and see, is it just music in general having an effect? Is it happy music in general? Or is it something about your favorite songs? And when we compared this, we then let them listen to the music and then ask them more about how they're feeling. The group that got to listen to their favorite songs felt way more connected, felt way more like they belonged with other people. It was like the cyberball game hadn't happened and they wiped out those effects. So it showed a really cool buffering effect, that if you're listening to music after you have this social exclusion, it can help you to not feel those negative feelings. And that was compared to that control group, which shows us it's not just any music that's doing this. It is something about your favorite songs, your connection to the artist, or remembering other people, or feeling immersed in it, rather than just having a happy beat in your ears. That's going to help you to feel social connection.
Yeah, yeah. So I know there are, if you go on YouTube, you can find like brain science, like happy music, stuff like that. Um, do you know, or do you have any thoughts about how your favorite music might compare to like a brain science music? I wonder maybe what kind of music was in your control group, if you have any more specifics about that.
Yeah, so it sounds like it probably was similar to that, but again, that shows that what we're looking at here is really specific to social needs rather than just positive mood. And that was true with my data as well, that when I controlled for just their mood in general, the social effects were above and beyond that. So this is this special component in your brain that we're looking at, of you having that primal need to belong, and that leads to your sense of well-being and fulfillment. That's a separate bucket in your all your toolbox here that you want to be filling to help you feel overall wellness, compared to just being distracted or having a positive mood that maybe those brain things might be tapping more into.
Right. And so when you think about kind of the implications or the benefits, or when you might want to use this in your toolbox, what what kind of is the effect of this research?
Well, what I think is so neat about this is that, especially when you're doing something like breaking habits and you're going to have yucky feelings in that process, that the yucky feeling part is part of it, and that's okay. You don't enjoy it, it doesn't feel good, but knowing that that's part of it and trying to push through it can kind of help us to think, okay, how can I strategize in those moments so I'm not leaning back into those habits or forming new habits that are also going to be detrimental. So that's where we come in and we think about, what strategies can I have in my toolbox that are accessible to me, affordable to me, don't have a lot of negative potential side effects. And that's where I think this hits all those targets. If you're laying in bed and somebody tells you a great way to feel better when you're breaking a habit is go for a 10-mile run, that's great. But that's a lot of effort before I can get to the endorphin part, and I might not be there. Or I might be sick or disabled or be doing childcare or be having weird work hours that don't allow me to just jump up and run 10 miles anytime I want to. So the idea that you can make a playlist on any platform, whether it be on YouTube or listening on Spotify or whatever. There's some way that you can access music relatively inexpensively. And you can be laying in bed listening to that music, minimal effort. All you're doing is pressing play and minimal potential bad side effects compared to starting some type of supplement or something that might biologically not sit well with you, or putting in the 10-mile run and realizing your body does not kick in with endorphins, not very pleasant. This is something that the worst side effects I can imagine here is your earbuds hurt your ears a little bit, or you spend 3 minutes listening to a song that you love that you decide, I don't really feel that much better after all. So I think this is a strategy people can really utilize. And for me in my own life, I thought about times like when I switched into staying home with my first child compared to being in a workplace that I'm around people all the time. Those 2 a.m. diaper changes, you're feeling lonely, you're feeling like nobody else is in the world with you out right now. And you can listen to music, it's accessible, put your earbuds in, you get that boost of social connection, you feel more positive benefit. That was not a time that I wanted to be running 10 miles or starting some new supplement or something like that. So to have this in my toolbox, very accessible, very affordable, minimal side effects, I think it's worth people trying out and seeing if it does benefit them.
Yeah, I think a couple of thoughts that I have from that. One is that you mentioned being up at night at 2 a.m. with your baby, and I know what that's like. And yes, it feels like nobody else in the world is awake, and you're
Yeah.
the only you're the only person
Yep.
there. Nobody, maybe even feel like nobody knows what you're going through, which of course is objectively false. Like there are millions and probably billions of people that know exactly what you're going through. And so to be able to have something like this, where you can be taken away from that feeling, and that thought, which in the moment, for me to say like other people know what I'm going through, that's not going to overcome the feeling, even though that's
Right. Right.
objectively correct. And
Mhm.
my feeling is based in like a false idea, but be able to have this kind of tool and like take me out of this kind of entrenched thinking. I can see how there would be so much value in that. And then the other thing I think about is you kind of compared it to going on a 10-mile run, which could be really inaccessible. But when you're talking about parasocial connection, and connecting maybe to influencers or people like that, those like that kind of connection, of course, is potentially fraught with difficulties and challenges. And like there are lots of challenges that accompany social media. And so to be able to have this kind of connection in a place and in a setting where maybe you're not as susceptible to like envy and other things that you might um, experience in like a social media setting, um, it also just seems like there's so much value in being kind of protected from that other world.
Yeah, I think that's important to bring up too, because the work is so mixed about social media because it can be used so differently. So it's great when you're connecting with a high school friend that lives states away, or your grandparents, or somebody that understands you with your medical condition that is so rare in your hometown that no one else has. There's so many great, awesome benefits for it. And then there also is this black hole of doom that, like you're talking about, where you're social comparing to other people that you know, or influencers or celebrities, and you're just getting sucked into feeling worse about yourself. It really is, it's a hard tightrope to walk. And I think psychology research is constantly struggling with, how do we explain that it can be really good and it also can be really bad, and it depends on so many factors. But I think intuitively we do recognize when it feels bad for us. And even when we recognize it, it still is very addicting and it can be hard to pull away from. And that's one of the habits that a lot of people do try to work on, is spending less time on their phone, or being diligent about what apps they're using or who they're following, what media content they're consuming. And it's really, really difficult. And like you said, if you want to get that social connection, but you're working on using Instagram less, that does put you in a bit of a bind. So if you can get that social connection by listening to your celebrity's music rather than following their account and looking at their Instagram stories, just like you mentioned, that kind of prevents you from slipping back into those habits that you're trying to work on, without it being, you don't get any sense of connection at all. And there's something to be said too with being able to plan ahead with this, is really nice, that you can make the playlist ahead of time and just have it ready to go. So when you're having that bad day, you're not using the cognitive effort of, how do I pull myself out of this? What do I do? You already have it set up. You're just pressing play and continuing to clean the kitchen or continuing to drive home or continuing to do whatever you are. And you can be getting those social benefits while you are still in your life. You don't have to put forth the effort of running the 10 miles. Ugh.
Yeah. 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 I mean, that preparation, I think that tip is really key because um, I know I'm not alone when I say this, but how many times do we go on our phones to do one little
Mhm.
tiny thing, and then 20 minutes later, I've done seven things
Right.
in, like
And
I've
none
done
of
half
them
of
the one
seven.
that you went for, right?
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. So having that thing ready, um, no matter what arena it's in, but right now in terms of having that music ready, like having a playlist, having a like distraction or happy or whatever that playlist is, like that's the thing that can get you into that mode and get you like away from being distracted and those other things.
Yeah, and I think you could even think about too, if this is really working for you, personalizing what type of playlist and seeing what works the best for you, because it could be different for everybody. You might want some really romantic playlist that reminds you of a romantic partner. You might not want that at all. You might say, you know what, freshman year house party songs from whatever year you graduated. That's what I want to be listening to when I'm cleaning the kitchen. It makes me feel connected to my, frat days. You might say, I want that road trip that my family and I took when I was in middle school, and I'm listening to these songs that my dad loved, and it reminds me of him, or what my grandfather used to listen to at his house before he passed on. Or, something about completely different that's just you and when you went and studied abroad and you're listening to music of the people that you spent time with abroad. There's so many different ways that you could create playlists that remind you of these connections, or again, remind you of your connection to the musical artist, and you just have a playlist that's all of Taylor Swift's greatest hits. There's so many different ways you could create playlists that could help you with feeling that social connection and getting that well-being, and you can really tailor it to what works best for you, which is very cool.
Yeah, yeah. So in a little peek into my life, in my Spotify playlist, I sort them by date. So I just name the playlist the date. And so I know, like, 2004, that's when I was a freshman in high school, or 2008, whatever. And so sometimes when I'm listening to music in my car with my 4-year-old and my 2-year-old, I'll be like, oh yeah, this is my middle school, this is my middle school song, or this is my high school song. And so sometimes my 4-year-old will say like, oh, let's listen to your high school songs or stuff like that. But yeah, it's
Like that you give your children context, because I just sing my son Britney Spears songs as if they are lullabies and he doesn't know any better. So that's just the way he's being raised.
my 4-year-old the other day said, how do you know all the words to these songs? And I was like, I've listened to them hundreds and thousands of times. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that speaks to the second point that you said, which is like the immersion and kind of the escape from the current place you're in, and kind of going to that other place and finding um, that place where that
Mhm.
song is for you. Um, okay, great. So we've talked about kind of the three big benefits of, and the three aspects of social surrogacy and how music hits on those. So solo music listening, especially for your favorite songs,
Mhm.
and thinking about these different periods in someone's life, and you talking about how the music that affects somebody is different for me and it's going to be different for you. And I would imagine that it's also going to be different for one person at different periods in your life. Do you think that's true as well?
Yeah, that's something I would like to look at more specifically in future work, but I definitely believe that could be the case of what works for you this year might be very different from the stage you're at and the way you feel a couple years from now. I think music could work throughout the lifespan, because throughout time we have seen people love music at all ages, from baby to elderly. But that being said, just like you said, I think future work really could look into, are there patterns that we see throughout the lifespan where people are drawn to different things and they work more effectively? That would be very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else that you imagine could be on the horizon, or things that you would be interested in exploring more that's kind of in this arena?
Yeah, I wonder too about the specifics of the type of music. So one of my students had thought about, she was really drawn to what we categorize best as emo music, which I also loved at some point of my life. And she was saying, why do I love this so much and my friends don't? Is there something about different genres of music, different tempos, different styles that might be more effective in general? Or again, this idea for specific people? So there's so many types of music and so many things we could look at in terms of that, of looking for patterns, or again, perhaps finding that it really is so person specific. When you look at the social surrogacy work in general, not just music, but again, things like TV shows, books, and so on, what over and over again the work has shown is that this is really beneficial for everybody, and it's beneficial in very different ways, which is good. So it's not one size fits all. You need to have 4 different non-traditional routes of social connection and 3 traditional in order to feel maximum good in your life. What we're finding is people fill their social gas tank very differently, and that's awesome because it works very differently for everyone. It's not a matter of how many strategies you use, if it's a relative and friend and social connection to the musical artist and having a romantic partner. You have to have 7 different things. It's not the amount of things, it's how much those things fill your bucket, which tells us if you feel like you're not social connected as much, you can just add in some more strategies or swap out the ones you're trying to use. And then you can get to a better place where you're feeling more well-being. So I think it's really amazing that regardless of things like attachment style, which relates so much to your types of relationships you have, regardless of how introverted or extroverted you are, regardless of male or female, regardless of age group that you are in your lifespan, these social traditional strategies and non-traditional strategies all work in tandem to help us fill our buckets and feel better, which means there's so many options for us. And so if one thing isn't really working for you, or you're in a place of your life that you can't access those things, again, this is something that you can put in your toolbox, seems very accessible, very affordable, low risk. And that's what I think is so exciting about it. Something that we really can apply and should be beneficial to a lot of people.
Cool. Yeah, that's amazing. I think it also fits really well in line with a lot of the episodes and a lot of things that we've talked about on this podcast, which is that this is a great tool and it's very individual and personal. Mhm. And figuring out how it applies to you almost requires you to be like a scientist in your own world. Mhm. And figuring out like, okay, when is this going to work? How is this going to work? And, how can I make the most of this?
And that's something empowering. I want people to listen and think, I can do things that make me feel better. I'm not powerless to the situation, especially when you're doing something like breaking a deep rooted habit. That's difficult work, and it's great that you're doing it. So to think, oh, I just have to slog through this and it's going to stink the whole time. This is something that can help you during that process, and nobody does know you better than you. So it's very empowering that you can be the person to figure out what works, tinker with it, and reap those benefits. You don't have to wait for an expensive therapy appointment or going to some other person and asking them to kind of figure out what's going on in your brain. You can actually implement this and then have the benefits happen like we saw in our work right away, that you are feeling better after just 5 minutes.
Amazing. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining, Elaine. I'm going to go open up Spotify and make some playlists.
There you go, and have your sun jam out with you the whole
Yeah,
time.
absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Adaptive Mind, brought to you by Nurture, the research-based app for overcoming unwanted or addictive behaviors. I hope you found our conversation insightful and inspiring. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and continue bringing these learnings to people that need them. Remember that you have an adaptive mind that does incredible things every day, and it's capable of even more. We'll see you in the next episode.